snow blew sideways in hard, stinging sheets, turning the motor pool into a white blur of motion and impact. The first thing that made sense in the chaos was the sound of metal shrieking as a truck door folded under shrapnel, followed by the hollow whomp of another mortar round slamming into the frozen ground. "Get down! Get down!" someone yelled, voice ripped away by the wind and the scream of the base alarm. The elevated mountain outpost, concrete walls, stacked barriers, a few squat buildings, sat in its bowl of snow and rock like something waiting to be buried. On three sides, dark pines climbed toward broken ridgelines. From those ridges, muzzle flashes winked in the pale daylight, a flickering crown of fire around the base. In the open near the motor pool, a platoon lay pinned behind trucks and low walls. Rounds stitched the ground, popping into snow and ricocheting off steel. Every time someone tried to crawl toward better cover, bullets reached for them, hurting them back into the shallow depression around the fuel trucks. "Motor pool's a kill box," the company commander muttered, crouched behind the smashed front end of a Humvee near the command post. "They're walking us into it." He keyed his radio, voice raw on the net. "Blackjack 6 to any supporting fires. This is troops in contact, priority, grid." Static hissed back at him like a living thing. He tried again, forcing calm into his tone as another mortar shook the ground. "Blackjack 6, requesting immediate air." "Repeat, immediate." More static. A brief burst of chopped words that might have been higher headquarters, then a low, grinding digital buzz. The satellite uplink had been temperamental for a day. They all knew that. But this wasn't temperamental. This was crushed. "Jammer." The JDAC beside him snapped, tapping his headset. "They're sitting on us. I can't get anything through." Across the compound, the platoon at the motor pool huddled lower. A row of fuel trucks loomed behind them, hulking silhouettes under a crust of ice. Beyond the trucks, a makeshift aid station was crowded into a maintenance bay. Tarps, cots, the wounded they had already pulled in when the first rounds hit. Downrange, in the tree line, a figure in a dark parka dashed from trunk to trunk, shouldering a tube on his back. He dropped to one knee, spiking the launcher into his shoulder and sighting down toward the fuel and the thin-roofed bay behind it. "RPG team, North Treeline," somebody screamed over the wild chatter of small arms. "He's got the trucks." A young rifleman broke cover, trying to get an angle, slipping in the snow. Machine gun fire snarled and snapped around him, wooden splinters and ice crystals exploding at chest height. He threw himself back behind a tire as a round clipped the edge of his helmet. The RPG gunner settled his aim. The storm of bullets, mortars, and shouted orders seemed to tighten around that single, invisible line between launcher and target. Then, through it all came a different sound. One clean, sharp crack. The RPG man jerked, the tube slipping from his shoulder. He toppled sideways into the snow. His spotter, reaching to steady him, snapped backward a heartbeat later, a small red mist blooming against the white. Two bodies lay still. "What the?" The nearest squad leader lifted his head, stunned. "Where did that?" Another subsonic whip of a round arrived a moment after the crack, burying itself in the snow asleep at his feet. He ducked instinctively, then realized the shot hadn't been for him. It had gone past, out beyond the motor pool. On the ridgeline above the main gate, a machine gun nest had been stitching long, angry arcs across the base entrance, pinning the gate defenders behind concrete. Now the gunner's head snapped back, helmet tumbling free, and the heavy weapon sagged. The assistant gunner lunged to catch it, then jerked, twisted, and dropped. The gun fell silent. For a second, the base's soundscape stuttered. The constant roar of that machine gun had been like a drumbeat. Without it, everything felt wrong, unbalanced. "Gate guns down," somebody shouted from the wall. "They're off the gate." "Who hit them?" the JTAC demanded, pressing his binoculars to his eyes. "We don't have a shooter up there." Through the glass, the ridges were a mess of rock, stunted trees, and muzzle flashes. Nothing else. No friendly figures, no glint of scope. On the net, a dozen voices overlapped. "Command, this is Second Squad. Was that our designated marksman?" "Negative, Falcon 2 is Kia. Repeat, Kia, he went down in the first barrage. Then who? Did we get QRF early? Is there a team on the ridge? No friendly Overwatch on the roster, the operations sergeant insisted. I'd know. The commander scanned the high ground, jaw clenched, snow stinging his face. Someone's up there, he said. Another crisp rifle report snapped across the valley. A distant heavy weapon, hidden low in a rock slot above the motor pool, coughed twice, then went quiet. One of the defenders dared to peek, saw the barrel tilting, then a body slumping out of the nest. Over the next 60 seconds, for more key enemy weapons went dark. An RPG team sprinting toward the fuel yard lost its leader mid-stride. A pair of fighters pushing a light mortar slid up the hillside, both pitched forward, tumbling away from their weapon. A figure in a thicker jacket, barking orders into a handheld radio near the tree line, jerked and fell face first into the snow, the radio bouncing free. Each shot was spaced, patient, deliberate. No wasted rounds. No wild arcs of automatic fire. Just a repeated pattern. Crack, pause, collapses. On the ground, the defenders felt for the first time that the air around them wasn't entirely poisoned, that someone was reaching into the chaos and cutting precise threads out of it. Pin squads began to move. 2 soldiers grabbed a wounded comrade under his arms and dragged him toward the aid station, trusting that any enemy who tried to track them would suddenly find his own world catastrophically narrowed. Anybody got eyes on the shooter? The JTAC pressed, spinning slowly, looking up. Anything at all? All I see is rock and snow. A sergeant on the wall answered. Rock, snow, and a lot of pissed-off bad guys. On a lip of frozen stone high above the valley, hands in thick gloves worked the bolt of a long rifle, smooth and practiced. Brass tinked against rock, tumbling away into a crack. The shooter's breath puffed in quick, controlled bursts, white against the black metal of the scope. The figure lay prone on a perch wide enough for a single body, no more. One wrong shift on the ice, one careless move, and they'd slide, tumbling into nothing. Wind clawed at the edges of a faded winter jacket too large for its wearer, flapping stray threads. The rifle settled again. The crosshairs moved. Below, an enemy machine gun reappeared, a fresh crew trying to man it. The shooter's finger rested alongside the trigger, then eased in. Another crack rolled down. Back at the command post, another mortar hit closer, showering them with dust and chips of concrete. The lights flickered. They're walking rounds toward the CP, the operations sergeant said. We're running out of time, sir. The commander lowered his useless radio, throat tight. Whoever was up on that ridge was the only reason they were still in the fight at all. 12 hours ago, the narrator's voice would say later, in the edit, over slow-motion shots of that same base basking under a peaceful sky, she was just another visitor in a borrowed parka. Now the commander grabbed the nearest squad leader by his vest, pulling him close over the roar. Find me whoever's up there, he shouted. I don't care who it is. I want eyes on that shooter. He didn't see the figure on the ledge adjust her cheek weld and blink snowflakes from her lashes. He didn't see that the hands on the rifle were slimmer, older, the knuckles faintly scarred from a life's worth of work. He only heard another shot ring out, saw another enemy weapon fall silent. Find them, he repeated, more quietly to himself now, as a mortar round cracked just outside, rattling the glass. Before this whole place comes down. The helicopter had come in under an open sky. Back then the air had been calm, the snow drifting in lazy spirals instead of being ripped sideways by explosions. The rotors beat a steady rhythm, sending waves through the snow on the landing pad, making it dance in white fans. She stepped down from a skid with deliberate care, clutching the strap of her duffel in one hand. The base parka they'd loaned her was one size too big, the hood fur brushing her cheeks as she turned, wary of the slick metal. You good, ma'am? One of the crew chiefs shouted over the engine whine, offering a steadying hand. I'm good, she answered, voice dry with the cold, though her eyes were moving, taking in the high walls, the curling razor wire, the knot of soldiers by the landing zone, the steep slopes rising on every side. Her name was Kara Novak, and as far as anyone here knew, she was just visiting. The son she'd come to see shouldered past a couple of younger soldiers, grinning wide. The chevrons on his sleeve were worn but clean. He had a headset crooked around his neck and a smudge of grease on his temple. "Mom," he called, relief and embarrassment all tangled together. She set the duffel down long enough to pull him into a hug. It felt like clutching a bundle of gear wrapped in too many layers. But beneath the uniform and armor, he was still her boy, his heartbeat solid against her cheek. "Irie," she said, leaning back to look at him. "You look tired." "That's just my face now," he joked. "Welcome to Kestrel. Watch your step, don't lick any metal. And if somebody says incoming, just follow the guy who's running the fastest." The nearby soldiers laughed. A few came forward to take her bag, to usher her away from the spinning blades. They were friendly, curious, the way young troops always were when someone's parent appeared in their closed little world. "Staff Sergeant Novak, your mom?" one of them asked, giving Kara a once-over. "Ma'am, welcome. You picked our best tour guide. He knows every busted cable and coffee stain on this base." Kara smiled, but her attention kept drifting to the horizon. The bowl of the valley pushed up against the sky, dark trees etched against white slopes. Two ridgelines rose on either side, jagged and severe, leaning over the outpost like folded arms. She watched the way the sunlight fell across them, where the shadows were thickest, where the bare rock showed through. In the ready room, they tried to make it all less serious. Someone had scrounged a battered folding chair for her, parked it near the wall where a large topographical map hung, covered in grease, pencil markings, and notes. "So this is where the magic happens," Ryan said, gesturing at the radios, the laptops, the tangled cords. "We talk to the world from in here. Or try to. Depends on the day." "You run all this?" she asked. "Most of it. When it's happy." He tugged on a cable affectionately. "Satellite uplinks throwing a tantrum today. They've got in maintenance mode for some software push, so we're on backup. It's fine. Just means I spend twice as long trying to send half as much." He said it with a shrug, but Kara's gaze went to the small yellow tag hanging from the primary dish on the schematic. "Offline for Stalemate." "How long is it down?" she asked. "Couple more hours. Maybe into tomorrow if they're slow. Don't worry about it. Worst thing that happens is I drink more coffee and swear at it." His buddies chuckled. One of them made a crack about grounding the cloud and turning it off and back on again. The light was warm on their faces from the overhead bulbs. Outside, a snowplow trundled by, scraping ice. When they drifted toward the coffee pot, Kara stayed near the map. Her fingers hovered just above the laminate, following the contour lines around the base, seeing how the terrain rose abruptly, forming that bowl. She traced the ridges, the service tracks, the faintly penciled patrol routes. "Hey, ma'am," one of the privates said, noticing. "We got brochures, too, if you want the tourist version. This is the one with all the swear words." She gave him a small smile. "This is fine." He peered at the map with her. "We mostly worry about this road," he said, tapping the main access route snaking up the valley. "They like to drop surprises along here. But the hills? I mean, we watch them, but it's a whole lot of snow and not many people who like hiking that much." Her finger rested on a thin line marked Upper Service Trail, snaking above the base on the slope behind the motor pool. There were no scheduled patrol markers along it, no recent notations. "You use this much?" she asked. "Nah, snow's too deep, and it doesn't really go anywhere, just sort of clings to the hill until you hit a rock wall. Logistics guys take it when they're bored, I guess." The private shrugged. "Why?" "Just curious," she said. Later, they walked that same perimeter. The air had the soft bite of high-altitude cold. Her breath came out in steady clouds as she and Ryan moved along the inside of the wall, accompanied by a young guard who acted as informal guide. "That's the generator yard," Ryan said, pointing to the cluster of humming boxes behind a chain-link fence. "Don't touch anything in there unless you want to see the comms guy cry." Again, he thumbed his chest. Near the fence, two men in mismatched cold weather gear were crouched by a control panel, apparently checking readings. Their jackets didn't match any of the base's standard issue, but they had visitor badges clipped to their fronts. "Contractors," the private said. "They flew in yesterday. Something about load balancing or fuel efficiency. I tuned out after not my job." The two men straightened, one glancing up. Their eyes flicked quickly over Kara and the others, then away, too quickly. They shared a small nod with a local worker in a brown jacket before ducking around the generator housing. Kara's gaze lingered, not on their faces, but on their boots, already crusted with older snow. "You get many civilians up here?" she asked. "Not really," the private admitted. "It's a pain getting clearances through. Mostly they live down the valley, and we pretend that's close enough." Along the wall, she paused again. The snow near the base was scuffed by countless footsteps, vehicle tracks, and maintenance sled marks. But higher up, along the slope leading toward the barely used service trail, she saw a different pattern. Older boot tracks, half filled by fresh snow, angled across the hill where no patrol schedules were marked. "Those tracks up there," she said, nodding. The private squinted. "Probably locals hunting," he said, "or some bored engineer who took the scenic route. We've got sensors and cameras pointed that way. If it was anything serious, ops would yell at us." Kara followed the line of that trail with her eyes, up toward a dark smear of rock near the ridge. Sunlight bounced off something there, a quick, needle-bright glint. "You see that?" she asked. "See what?" Ryan turned, but the light had already shifted. The rock face looked ordinary again, a jagged bruise on the hillside. "Nothing," she said. At chow, the smell of overcooked pasta and powdered cheese filled the hall. Troops in cold-weather gear crammed into benches, hunched over trays, laughing at jokes that had been recycled for months. Kara sat with Ryan and his friends near a window that gave a view of the generator yard. Outside, the same two contractors stood near a junction box, their heads close together. The local worker reappeared, holding a clipboard, their conversation too far away to hear. Subtle nods, a glance toward the comms building. "You're staring at the generators like they insulted you," Ryan said, nudging her tray closer. "Eat, Mom. The flight up here is the most dangerous part of this trip, I promise." "That's supposed to help?" she asked, but took a bite anyway. The base commander stopped by their table, a tall man with graying hair and tired eyes. He offered a handshake and a polite word. "Thank her for loaning us your kid." "He's stubborn," she said. "I assume that helps sometimes." "It does," the commander agreed. "Today ought to be quiet anyhow. One platoon and a couple of trucks are out on a presence patrol down the valley, but otherwise this is as sleepy as Kestrel gets." He gestured vaguely at the window, the calm snow outside. "Honestly, you picked a good day for a visit." She let her gaze travel past the window again. The snow fell in big, soft flakes now, the wind low. The world looked postcard perfect. Later, they stood on a catwalk that ran along the inner wall, looking down into the bowl of the base and out across the valley. The sun was lowering, painting the slopes with orange and pale blue. The ridges were darker now, their edges sharp. "You can see everything from up here," Ryan said. "Those camera poles pull in feeds to the ops room. We've got sensors on the roads, tilt-pan zooms on the hills. It's basically a fishbowl, but with better Wi-Fi." "Fishbowl," she echoed quietly. She pointed at the ridgelines. "If someone owned those rocks, they'd own everything down here." "Yeah, but they don't," he said. "We got them covered. Besides, no one wants to hump a machine gun up that hill. Trust me, they'd rather just annoy us from the road." Aloham drew her eye. Across the open valley, a small quadcopter drone buzzed along a lazy path, no unit markings visible from this distance. It drifted near the tree lean, then veered, rising toward one of the ridges. "Whose is that?" she asked. Ryan shaded his eyes. "Probably ours," he said. "Intel guys like to play with their toys. If it wasn't, we'd have heard about it." No one called an alarm. No one checked. That night, the wind picked up, rattling loose siding and whistling through gaps. In the visitors' quarters, a narrow room with one bed and a small iron stove, Kara lay awake on top of the covers, listening. She replayed the day without wanting to. The tracks on the upper trail, the glint in the tree lean, the drones slipping behind the ridge, the contractors near the generators and junction boxes, the satellite uplink offline tag. It all might have been nothing, but the map in the ready room burned in her memory, the way the contour lines wrapped around the base. A bowl, two ridges, a service trail that didn't go anywhere and that nobody watched closely. Her fingers twitched, wanting the familiar weight of something that wasn't there. On nights like this, years ago, she'd been the one lying on some foreign hillside, counting voices and flares, reading the ground like scripture. Kara closed her eyes and told herself she was on leave now, retired in everything but paperwork. She had come here to see her son, not to ghost walk old habits. Whatever happened at Kestrel, there were officers and analysts and young soldiers to handle it. Still, sleep wouldn't come. Eventually she sat up, pulled on the parka, and went to the small window. Outside, floodlights lit the nearest buildings, but beyond them the snow merged with darkness. The ridgelines were only shadows against the stars. She watched until her eyes stung, then forced herself back to bed. By morning, the sky was heartbreakingly clear. Ryan met her on the catwalk after breakfast, breath puffing, cheeks red from the cold. "You ready for your actual tour now?" he asked. "Yesterday was just the trailer. Today, you get the behind-the-scenes look at all the junk we complain about." They walked the inner perimeter again. He pointed out the observation towers, the storage lots, the stacked bundles of supplies wrapped in plastic. Troops moved about their duties, stamping feet, tightening hoods. Somewhere, someone laughed at a joke loud enough for it to carry on the air. "See," he said, "quiet. You were up all night worrying for nothing." She didn't admit that she'd been up most of the night. She only nodded, squinting up at the ridges. Sunlight glared off the snow, making her eyes water. The trees looked still, innocuous. She noted where the sun struck the slopes most directly now, where the brightness might wash out a scope image, where shadows might hide muzzle flashes. Her mind did it automatically, unwanted. "I'm fine," she lied, when he gave her that too knowing look. "Just not used to this much white. Feels like I'm standing on a blank page." "Trust me," he said. "It's anything but blank once you've been here a while." He didn't get to finish the thought. The first mortar round landed in the generator yard, turning the morning into hell. The blast was a slammed door from the sky. Fire and smoke erupted over the fenced-in machines. The concussion hit the wall where they stood, knocking them both to their knees. A second round fell just short of the motor pool, throwing up a geyser of snow and metal. The sirens took half a heartbeat to catch up. Then they wailed, their rising howl layering over the shouts of surprised soldiers. Inside, Ryan yelled, grabbing her arm. "Move, move." A third mortar stripped a section of chain link from its posts, flinging it into the air like tinsel. Kara saw one of the supposed contractors vanish in a blur of flame and shrapnel, the junction box they'd been working near reduced to twisted steel. Men poured out of buildings, stumbling into gear as they ran. Smoke began to build, curling on the wind, obscuring sections of the yard. The precision of the impacts was unmistakable. The rounds weren't random. They were bracketing key points, walking toward the main gate and the command post. "Those aren't ranging shots," Kara shouted over the din as they scrambled down the catwalk stairs. "They already have the grid." Ryan dragged her toward the communication building, his shoulder hitting the door just as the next barrage landed. From the tree line, the flat, loud cough of a rocket launcher cut the air. An RPG slammed into the side of a nearby storage shed, shredding its wall and sending shards through the air like knives. Something hot scored across Kara's cheek. She tasted iron. Inside the comms room, organized chaos reigned. Operators were already at their consoles, headphones on, calling into microphones. "Blackjack 6, this is Kestrel Actual. We are under indirect fire. Satellite link is still down, sir," another voice cut in. "I'm routing through backup. It's not taking the traffic." The screens flickered, trying to speak with the world and failing. The primary uplink status bars glowed, an accusing red. "Try the local net," Ryan ordered, elbowing into his seat with his free arm. "Push to the Valley Relay, see if we can piggyback." As he spoke, the local net erupted in a teeth-gritting squeal of static. The interference wasn't the irregular, fuzzy kind of bad weather. This was clean, dense, deliberate. A jamming signal sat on their channels like an anvil. "Jammer," Kara said softly, the word flat her mouth. Through the small blast window, she could see more now. Dark figures moved along both ridges, exploiting trees and rock, advancing with quick, practiced bursts. Muzzle flashes winked. Bullets clanged off the base's outer walls. Machine guns set up in positions she recognized from the map. Angles that pushed defenders into predictable spots. They were trapped in the bottom of a bowl, and someone was dropping fire and lead on them from every side. Another explosion rocked the building. Plaster dust sifted down from the ceiling. One of the radio operators, standing to reposition a cable, was slashed across the face as glass from a broken light fixture fell. He staggered, blood in his eyes. "Get him to the aid station," someone called. "I'll take him," Ryan said reflexively, stepping forward. An RPG streaked into the wall outside. The impact slammed the room. The floor jumped. Ryan was hurled sideways, hitting the console and then the ground. Shrapnel bit into his shoulder, spinning him onto his back. Kara dropped to her knees, grabbing his vest. His face was white, teeth gritted. "I'm fine," he lied as she had. Blood soaked in his sleeve, dark and thick. A medic appeared at her side, hands already moving. "We got to get him out," the medic told her. "Ma'am, we'll take care of him." Ryan tried to push himself up, reaching for his headset. "The net, someone's got to stay on the—" "Shut up and go with the nice medic," Kara ordered, voice perfectly steady. "I'll make sure they keep talking." He stared at her a second, then read the firmness in her eyes. He nodded once, letting the medic haul him to his feet. She watched them go, feeling something tear and shift in her chest. Then she forced herself to breathe and turned back to the window. The platoon that had been out on patrol wouldn't be back in time. The QRF, if they could reach them at all, was 40 minutes away at best. The satellite uplink was cold and dead. Their backup links were jammed. Out in the motor pool, she saw soldiers diving behind vehicles, the snow around them erupting with incoming rounds. A heavy machine gun on the ridge hosed the open ground, jaws of fire chewing closer with every burst. On the wall outside the comms room, the commander and his staff pressed around a table where the same topographical map from the ready room lay spread and marked up. Now it had circles drawn in red where impact craters dotted the base. "We need to pull back to the inner buildings," one lieutenant argued. "Consolidate, ride it out. We can't abandon the motor pool," the operations sergeant countered. "If the fuel goes up, the aid station goes with it. We'll lose half our wounded and a quarter of our supplies." "QRF is en route," another voice said, "but I can't give an ETA. The Valley Relay isn't acknowledging, and Hire's only getting fragments from us." Kara stepped closer, eyes flicking between the map and the snow outside. The pattern jumped out at her now, impossible to unsee. The mortars weren't random. They'd hit the generators, the gate approaches, the motor pool, and now they were marching in a curve that would eventually rake the command post and the comms bunker. She let her gaze travel outward again. The ridge behind the motor pool, where the seldom-used service trail cut across. The rock lip near the top. The place where yesterday's glint had flashed. Her stomach went cold in a way that had nothing to do with the air. "They're hurting your people," she said quietly. The commander glanced at her, not fully registering. "Ma'am, this isn't." "Look." She tapped the map with one finger, tracing the bowl. Here. You're being pushed into this depression near the fuel and the motor pool. Their heavy guns sit here and here." She marked the ridges. "You stay in current positions, your guys in the open are done. You pull everyone inward, they collapse your infrastructure and punch your comms bunker while you're blind." The room stilled for a second. A stray round pinged off the outer wall, making someone flinch. "You are?" the commander asked, squinting at her. "Just visiting," she said. It wasn't the time to unpack that. "What long rifles do you have left?" she asked instead. "Anything with glass on top." The designated marksman had the only serious scope, the operations sergeant said. "He's down. Closest thing is a modified rifle in the arms room. Semi-auto, decent glass. Couple mags. We weren't exactly expecting to need a sniper today. So right now," she said, "nobody can reach their jammer, or their heavy weapons, or whoever is walking those mortars in." The JTAC slammed a fist lightly against the table. "I can't even tell air where to go," he said. "I hear them. They don't hear me. We need that jammer gone." Kara felt a familiar, quiet settle over her. It had an edge, like slipping cold metal into a familiar groove. "I'll take the rifle," she said. The room turned collectively. The commander stared. "Ma'am, that's not. If you don't knock out that jammer and at least some of their heavier guns," she said, "your QRF will have a smoking hole to land in. Your son will be in that hole. So will everyone else out there." Her voice didn't rise, but something in it cut through the chatter. "You need someone on high ground with a clear line of sight to their key positions. Right now, you don't have anyone. You're a civilian," the lieutenant protested. "We can't." "She's not just a civilian," the intel officer said suddenly, having been silent until now. His eyes were on her with a flicker of recognition. "I've read that name before." Kara felt his gaze like a hand on the back of her neck. Camera flashes of memory. Dusty hills, a stretch of broken wall, a scope crosshair centered on a doorway where... She cut the thought off. "I know this terrain," she said instead. "I walked part of it yesterday. I saw where they'd come from if they were smart. They're using the same trail I saw tracks on. They're using that rock lip up there. It's the only place that gives them all those angles. Give me the rifle and let me out the back gate. I can get above them." "You can't just," the lieutenant started. "Why is your satellite link down today?" she asked, turning to the intel officer. "Why were your generators being tinkered with by contractors no one here knows well? Why were there fresh tracks on the upper trail 2 days ago and a drone skimming behind that ridge last night?" Silence. The mortar impacts outside punctuated it. "This isn't random," she said. "Whoever is coming for you is counting on your blind spot and your maintenance schedule. You want to argue protocol while your people bleed? Go ahead. Or you can let me do what somebody should have planned for." The commander studied her, the map, the window. Another round impacted closer, rattling the glass. The base shuddered. "What's left in the arms room?" he asked the sergeant. "1 DMR, sir," the sergeant replied. "Optic's been rattling around, but it held 0 last time we checked. 4, maybe 5 mags." "Get it," the commander ordered. He looked back at Kara. "You step outside these walls. I can't guarantee anyone can cover you. They're on the ridges. You'll be alone out there." She thought of Ryan, arm bleeding, forced out of his seat at the radio. Thought of the objective-coded efficiency of the mortar impacts. "I won't be alone," she said. "They'll be there too." The rifle came in a green case, heavier than it looked. When the sergeant popped the latches, the smell of oil and metal filled the air. Kara reached for it with hands that didn't shake, fingers finding familiar points of contact. Charging handle, magazine release, safety, the knurled focus ring on the scope. "Do you even remember how to run that thing?" the lieutenant muttered, unable to help himself. Kara shouldered the rifle, letting the weight settle. Looking down the hall, through the window, she imagined the route up the slope, the trail, the ledge. Her cheek rested against the stock. "I remember." The sergeant handed her a small handheld radio. "Backup frequency," he said. "Short range. Battery's not great." "We weren't exactly expecting to be handing it to he trailed off. "Try not to talk on it," she said. "I'll call if I have to." She clipped spare magazines to the parka's pockets. They felt like old, rectangular ghosts against her ribs. At the door, she paused, glancing back once through the chaos of the command post. The map, the scattered papers. The faces turned toward her, some skeptical, some hopeful, all scared. "I'll hit the jammer," she said. "Then the guns. Then whoever's trying to pry your comms bunker open. When your comms pop back, don't waste it. Call your friends." "Kestrel," the commander said, voice rough, "good hunting." She stepped out into the snow, pulling the hood up against the wind. Other bodies surged the opposite way, rushing toward bunkers and interior positions. She moved against the flow, cutting toward the motor pool's backside where a narrower maintenance gate waited. No escort, no one calling coordinates in her ear, just the rifle in her hands, the map in her head, and the knowledge that if she miscalculated even once, this would be the last time she walked any kind of trail. Behind her, the base roared and burned. Ahead, the upper service path climbed, half buried in white, toward a ridge that didn't appear on tourist brochures. She went that way anyway.